Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the subject of my special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is a historic day. It is the 4th day of the Democrats' government shutdown. There is a profound difference of opinion on not just Obamacare, but on the size and role of government in our lives. The future course of our country and what we look like hangs in the balance. Will we continue down the path of a bigger government that takes more of our hard-earned money, inflicts a substandard health care system on us, and tramples our rights, or will we be a nation of the people, by the people, and for the people that protects our rights, ensures our liberties, and allows us to keep our hard-earned money? These are big decisions, and America is watching how we as leaders solve these problems and come to a resolution. As Republicans, we have been here and have put forth proposal after proposal to fund the government and keep it open and protect the American people from this onerous health care law. We have sent over to the Senate numerous proposals to keep the government open while ensuring no one gets special treatment under Obamacare. Unfortunately, Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats rebuffed every attempt to negotiate and slammed the door to talking. They went home last weekend. We stayed here and worked. They tabled each of our proposals. We appointed conferees. Harry Reid refused to appoint conferees. He has slammed the door to reopening government by refusing to talk. President Obama called Speaker Boehner to the White House yesterday. We were encouraged. Sadly, the message was, "I've called you here to tell you I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to talk. Goodbye." You can't negotiate if you won't talk. My mother is a pretty special lady and a pretty wise woman. When I was a little girl, she knew how to get my sister and I talking again when we were mad after a fight. She'd make us sit in a room together for half an hour. We hated it. It was uncomfortable at first. We didn't want to make eye contact or communicate, but by the end of 30 minutes, we were always talking again, and we were ready to set aside our differences and move forward. That's what needs to happen here. Got a post here. Let's talk. That's what we need to do. But instead, the President has resorted to tactics and over-the-top political stunts that are not only harmful to moving the discussion forward, but harmful to American citizens. He furloughed defense civilians and reserve personnel. This is in spite of the legislation we passed and he signed to prevent that. The Pay Our Military Act appropriates funds to our military and allows all defense workers to remain on the job. But the President has decided to furlough workers anyway. As a result, over 150,000 Army civilians and 75,000 Navy civilians were sent home. Reports are coming in that long overdue maintenance at shipyards is being delayed and not completed. Our national defense is jeopardized because our Commander-in-Chief has sidelined our military. But that's not all. The President has chosen to try to inflict as much public pain as possible to get his way. For the first time in history, he has closed the U.S. memorials in Washington, D.C. and around the world. Despite many of these memorials being open-air venues with 24/7 access 365 days out of the year, he has spent precious tax dollars renting barricades to close them. Earlier this week, President Obama ordered the National Park Service to close the World War II Memorial despite the fact that numerous World War II veterans have been planning for months to travel to D.C. to visit the iconic memorial as part of the Honor Flight program. Here's a picture of what they were greeted with. Instead of being greeted like heroes, these veterans came to D.C. to see metal barriers surrounding the monument in the middle of the mall erected to honor their service and their sacrifice. There was no need to ever close the World War II Memorial other than to make a political point, as keeping these monuments open would not cost a thing and were funded primarily through private donations by those wishing to honor these veterans. When I went down Wednesday morning to help remove the barriers for veterans from Missouri so they could see their memorial, I was ashamed of the President's action and continuous lack of respect for the men and women who fought and died for our country. The unprecedented action of closing monuments has never been authorized during any previous government shutdown by any other president, including President Clinton, and underscores this president's desire to purposely do everything in his power to make Americans suffer from his political games. The president has since seen the public outcry and opened the World War II memorial, but only to veterans. Unfortunately, it remains barricaded to the general public and all other war memorials. President Obama has also barricaded other venues in D.C., such as the FDR Memorial, the Lincoln Memorial, and the new Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. And here they are in this poster doing that. He himself dedicated this memorial in 2011, and during his dedication speech, he referenced many important milestones in the life of Dr. King and made reference to the fact that this monument was meant for all who seek freedom and testament to the numerous, and here's the president's words, the numerous barricades that have fallen since Dr. King started his fateful journey to push for social justice. However, the president has chosen to needlessly punish Americans who travel to D.C. to pay homage to the monument and has literally erected barriers to keep out those visitors. In that same 2011 speech, the president points out that if Dr. King were alive today, and here's his quote, he would want us to know we can argue fiercely about the proper size and role of government without questioning each other's love of country, with the knowledge that in this democracy, government is no distant object, that is rather an expression. It's rather an expression of our common commitments to one another. He would call on us, Dr. King would, to assume the best in each other rather than the worst, and challenge one another in ways that ultimately heal rather than wound. I sincerely wish the President would heed Dr. King's wise words and sit down with us so we can work out our differences instead of needlessly punishing Americans for his inability to find common ground and civilly pass legislation. Let's talk. Now I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to share their thoughts about this important time in history. So I would like to yield a couple of minutes here to my good friend from Tennessee, Diane Black. Diane?
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Madam Speaker, Obamacare is having disastrous effect on the Americans across this country. And in my home state of Tennessee, premiums are rising by as much as 190%. And now schools are being forced to reduce hours for substitute teachers. Every day, constituents contact my office with stories about how this devastating law is hurting them. Lewis in Hendersonville told me that his premiums are going up, and I quote, "We do not know how to address this huge additional burden. Please help." Tracy in Smithville wrote to me and said, and I quote, "I will have to close my business due to Obamacare. I'm a veteran, and I have spent 21 years building this business. It's a shame that it has come to this. Everything that I have worked for a while, everything that I have worked for will be gone because of this bill." Jeffrey in Goodlettsville is a small business owner who wrote to me, and I quote, "Please continue fighting back against this law. My constituents and Americans across the country never supported this law that is being rammed down their throats by the President and Senate Democrats. And my House Republican colleagues and I have repeatedly worked to try to protect them from the law's disastrous effects. But instead of listening to the American people, the Senate Democrats have shut down the government to prevent their own Obamacare carve-out. Madam Speaker, this is shameful. And it's past time that Harry Reid negotiate with this House to address the concerns of the American people over this disastrous law. I yield back.
Thank you, Diane, for those great words. And now I'd like to give my time to the gentleman from Florida who knows a little bit about serving his country in multiple ways, including being a part of the U.S. Navy. So, Mr. Ron DeSantis.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the time. I just want to address some things that I've been hearing out there that just strike me as wrong. For example, the President said that Obamacare has nothing to do with the budget. Now that is very rich considering it was passed using budget reconciliation in order to ram it through the Senate with less than 60 votes. So it was good. It was a budget issue then, somehow it's not now. Of course, the individual mandate has been ruled a tax by the Supreme Court, and it authorizes trillions of dollars in new spending. Now, some say Obamacare is the law and therefore cannot be changed. Well, this body has the constitutional authority to legislate. We can always amend or change laws. But I would also say, if this particular law is somehow so special and sacrosanct, then why isn't the president enforcing it as written? Indeed, he has given waivers and exemptions to politically connected entities, including a bailout for members of Congress, giving them relief from the text of the very law that they passed without reading. I think Obamacare is dangerous in terms of how it's going to impact economic growth and medical care in the country, but just in terms of good government, this really is a recipe for institutionalized cronyism. You have burdens imposed on society, and then those who have political connections can get those burdens removed. So employers can get it removed. We know there will be something for labor unions at some point, but if you're an individual, well, you still got to abide by Obamacare's dictates. Some say doing individual bills is simply cherry picking. We can't pass individual spending bills, which the House has been doing very resolutely over the last several days. Big omnibus CRs, that is not the way business is supposed to be done. You're packing all the departments into one big bill. You're forfeiting Congress's ability to make good spending choices, forfeiting Congress's oversight authority, locking in bad policy. We haven't done appropriations bills in this House for years. A lot of this stuff that's locked into these CRs was done when we had the previous Speaker of the House. So individual bills are better. The Senate should absolutely act on our bills. And then just finally, I would say before I yield back to the gentlelady from Missouri, Obamacare is the only major piece of legislation that's passed in the last 80 years that had zero support from the other party. Social Security had 80% of the Republicans in the House. Civil Rights Act, 80% of the Republicans in the House. Reaganomics, the Reagan economic program, had 78% of Democrats in the Senate. So typically these big laws have broad bipartisan support. This one didn't, and we have a lot of constituents who didn't want it to begin with and don't like living under it now. So thank you for doing that, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think that's very true, and it shows that we are here fighting for a bunch of people in this country who it's hurting. And that's why we need to repeal it or amend it or do something to stop this onerous law that's hurting people. So thanks for bringing that up. Now I'd like to yield time to my good friend from Colorado, Doug Lamborn. 4 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I want to talk about negotiations. The president, unfortunately, has said he's not going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. And Harry Reid has said he's not going to send negotiators to sit down with Republicans and talk about the continuing resolution and the government slowdown or shutdown. But that begs the question, who does the president negotiate with? Well, take a look here. Bashar Assad, the dictator of the regime in Syria, who has used poison gas on his people about 15 times. 100,000 people have died in that civil war. And after the latest explosion of poison gas, the civilized world was outraged at the 1,500 people who were killed. And John Kerry now has entered into negotiations with the Russians acting as intermediaries. So the Russians are going to help negotiate with the Syrians. And this has the blessing of the president. I wish success on this venture. I hope the negotiations come to something. But they're willing to negotiate with these reprehensible dictators from around the world, and that includes Iran. Iran now has entered into discussions with the State Department and the president. The president has talked to the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, and I wish success upon these negotiations. They're trying their best. But when you think about these characters around the world, in some cases evil regimes that the president is negotiating with, who is he not negotiating with? The Republicans in the House. John Boehner is the Speaker of the House, and the Republicans in the conference represent over half the people in America. Over half of the Americans are represented by Republicans here in Congress, over half the country. And yet the president won't even negotiate. Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, won't even send negotiators to talk to House negotiators. I think this is wrong. I think we really should have some negotiations. I think we should have some discussions. If these people merit negotiation and discussion, certainly half of the country, the Republicans here in the House who represent half the country, should enter into negotiations. So I call on the President to negotiate with the Speaker and House Republicans on the debt ceiling. I call on Harry Reid to send negotiators to meet with House Republicans to talk about the government slowdown or shutdown, however you want to call it. We need to negotiate, Mr. President. We need to negotiate, Mr. Reid. And I yield back to the gentlelady from Missouri. Thank you.
I mean, we have extended our hand to the Senate and to the President this entire time, and yet we've had the door slammed in our face. But you're right. He's negotiated with others. So it's time for him to negotiate with us. Thank you for bringing up those excellent points. Now I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, my friend, Jeb Hensarling from Texas.
Well, I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I especially thank her for her leadership on this special order. And her leadership on behalf of all of our men and women who serve in uniform, many in her district, and she is well respected within this institution for what she has done for our military. Well, Madam Speaker, I know the American people occasionally get somewhat confused on what is going on in Congress. Here's what's easy to understand. House Republicans have put not one offer on the table, not 2, not 3, but 4. 4 different offers to negotiate with the President and the Democrats. What do we hear from the President? What do we hear from Harry Reid? No negotiations. You know, I still recall vividly my mother-in-law who has a saying, the least you can do in life is show up. President Barack Obama and Harry Reid have not shown up. Now, I know that the President says at one time in his life he taught constitutional law. Some of us find that somewhat ironic, because if the President actually knew the Constitution, then he would know that it is the Congress that has the power of the purse. It is Congress that appropriates funds. Nowhere will you find in the Constitution that Congress is relegated to the power of the rubber stamp. And so we know that the President and Harry Reid want us to rubber stamp the health care policies of this administration that we hear about every single day. Every single day I'm hearing from one of my constituents, Congressman Hensarling. They just cut me back to 29 hours because of Obamacare. Congressman Hensarling, my health care premiums are going up $1,500 because of Obamacare. And yet we're told by the President, well, it's the law, don't touch it. Well, it's a law that he's already changed 7 times, and it is a law that's hurting our constituents. And no, Republicans are never going to give up on our quest to have patient-centered health care that's right for our families and doesn't harm our economy and is not an affront to our freedom. So we'll never give up on that. Now, Madam Speaker, we know that the President's not going to sign away his signature item, and we know since so much of this spending is what we call mandatory spending, automatic spending. Okay. We know the President's not going to cooperate to repeal it or defund it. We'll never give up our quest. But, Madam Speaker, all we're asking for now is if Obamacare is going to be imposed on the American people, then it ought to be imposed equally. None of these special interest deals, none of these sweetheart deals. You know what? If it's good enough for the American people, it ought to be good enough for the President. Why wasn't he the first one, the very first one signing up for this? Why wasn't there a line at the White House? Well, I can tell you why, Madam Speaker, because guess what? They exempted themselves. The American people are tired of Washington elites passing laws that the rest of us are supposed to live under. That's not what the American people expect. And so Republicans are asking one thing. You know what? If Obamacare is going to be imposed on America, no special deals for big business, no special deals for big labor. If they're going to get a one-year reprieve, then working Americans ought to get a one-year reprieve. And if it's good enough for working Americans, it ought to be applied to the President, his cabinet, everyone in the White House, and the Congress. Now listen, I don't want to put my family in the exchanges. I don't want to lose the employer contribution that the taxpayers have so generously given us. But we're not going to have the President act like he can make the law. No member of Congress, no one in the White House is above the law. And so that's what we're trying to do. We want negotiations. We want, if we're going to get stuck with Obamacare while the President is the President, then let it be applied equally. But this is bigger than this, Madam Speaker. Millions and millions of our fellow countrymen are either unemployed or underemployed. They need our help. And so this is a spending bill. The President's economic policies have failed. We want fundamental tax reform. We want to get rid of the red tape burden. We want to take our nation off the road to bankruptcy. I say this not just as a member of Congress. I say this as the father of a 10-year-old son and an 11-year-old daughter. And so somehow the President says, oh, yeah, you can't mess with this spending bill, and we want you to rubber stamp the debt ceiling. Republicans say, no, 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 Mr. President. We'll negotiate with you in good faith. And maybe the electorate gave you the White House. Maybe they gave you the Senate. But the American people gave the House to the Republican Party, and we will not sit idly by while men and women are unemployed, underemployed, wondering how they're going to feed their families. We're not going to sit idly by while he bankrupts this nation for future generations. No, no, no. We will not sit idly by. We're ready to negotiate, but we are through negotiating with ourselves, and the American people will demand, ultimately, that the President and Harry Reid negotiate and we work together to get this economy back and put us on a road to fiscal solvency so that our best days will once again be ahead of us. And I thank the gentlelady for yielding time.
You bet. Thank you so much, gentlemen. What wise words there about what this fight is about for the future generations of our country and how we are fighting for a better health care system and a government that lives within its means. It's time to do that, and it's time to negotiate for the President and the Senate to come and talk to us. So let's talk. And I'm glad today to have a friend of mine, Brad Winstrup, here from Ohio, who we have the honor of serving together in the Armed Services Committee, and I really respect him and his views not only as a patriot and a member of the Armed Services, but also as a doctor. So I yield 4 minutes to our gentleman.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. You know, this slowdown, shutdown, has taken on many particular angles and a lot of accusation and a lot of discussion. But as we get to this point in it, although Obamacare is driving the shutdown, it's not merely about the millions that will still be uninsured. And it's not merely about the 50% or more of this country that will be on Medicaid where access to care is extremely limited. And it's not only about rates going up. It is about that health care is going backwards in America, not forward. And this shutdown is not only about the fact that in Ohio we passed a constitutional amendment that made the mandate unconstitutional in Ohio, only to be overridden by the Supreme Court, where 66% of the people in Ohio did not want this law. And I'm from Ohio, and I'm here to continue to fight for that. And I'm bothered as we're going through this, and I hear the arguments, and I hear people refer to terrorism, jihad, and bombs strapped to their chest. Well, as someone who served a year in Iraq as a combat surgeon during the bloodiest time of the war, 2005, 2006, I guarantee you what's taking place here is not that. And it's shameful when people use those types of references, and I would bet that those that have served in war would understand that that's not appropriate here. We're here to negotiate, we're here to discuss, and we're here to represent the American people. And really, I thought when I came here, I'm new, I'm a freshman, I thought that fair treatment for all Americans would be something that's common ground for all of us. And I thought that having special subsidies for members of Congress would be something that we would all disagree on, and that would be another area of common ground. Those are the basic premises that are driving this shutdown right now, because we have passed continuing resolutions that would fund the government completely if we would just sit down and agree that these portions of this law are wrong and they go against what we as Americans believe in, that we're to be treated fairly, that there's no special premises for other people, for one group over the other. I thought those would be areas of common ground, and I'm surprised that this still goes on. We'll continue the fight of things we disagree with within Obamacare and try and improve our health care system as we go along. But it interests me when people say it's the law, get over it. Well, it's not the law that was passed when you're changing things. And that's the problem. And I wonder sometimes if the presidential election was different. Say, for example, Mitt Romney had won, and he went into the presidency and he said, I'm going to exempt this group. I'm going to exempt that group. I'm going to change the law and provide a subsidy to those that it's not written into the law for. What would the outcry be? The outcry would come from me, I guarantee you, because I believe in the rule of law and I believe in fairness under the law. We need to sit down and figure this out. The president is the president, and he has the seat at the head of the table. But he was not the only one elected. We've all been elected to represent the people, and we all have a seat at the table. And that's what needs to take place. I hear arguments from the other side talking about, as we're passing these resolutions, well, you're picking and choosing now. That's exactly what Obamacare has done. Mm-hmm. Throughout that law, there is picking and choosing. So when I hear the other side say we're picking and choosing now, I said, thank you for making our argument, because that's what we're having problems with. I pray for a better day, and Lord willing, we all will sit down at the table and get these things figured out on behalf of the American people. That's what we were sent here to do, and I hope we can get that done. And I urge those that will not come forward to think about it and come forward and sit and talk with us. And with that, I yield back, and I appreciate you putting this together this evening for us to have a chance to discuss these issues.
You bet. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You've really spoke to the heart of this whole issue, and that we want fair treatment for all. The President has given over 2,000 waivers of this law to special interests and to certain groups, given special treatment to members of Congress and their staff, and has said that businesses and large corporations don't have to comply for a year. But yet he has been unwilling to give a one-year extension to the hardworking families in my district, in your district, and individuals who work so hard. And the ones that we're hearing about. And so that's not fair. So we hope that, I hope that the President and the Senate will listen to your words tonight and will be willing to come forward and sit down and visit with us where we find that common ground and where we can delay this for a year and move forward as a country. So thanks for bringing up those great points. I'm very happy tonight to get to yield to a friend of mine from Missouri. Representative Jason Smith, he's here and he's doing a fantastic job. I feel very honored to serve with you, and the people of the 8th District of Missouri know you're doing a fantastic job on their behalf. So love to hear your thoughts on this at this historic time about the matters before us.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here this evening to talk about the effects that Obamacare has on the folks in rural Missouri. And I also want to thank my colleague and my neighbor just west of me in Missouri, Miss Congressman Vicky Hartzler, for having us and for putting on the special orders. Sure. Just over a week ago, I posted on my Facebook page asking the folks back home, give me examples and comments of how Obamacare has affected you. It's amazing. We were inundated with tens and tens of people and just different stories after every story. And I want to share a few of those stories of real families that are facing the struggles of Obamacare back home. We have folks all the time that ask, is the fight worth it? Is the fight worth defunding and delaying Obamacare? And I'll let you all decide, but let me give you a few examples. Paul from East Prairie, down in Mississippi County in Missouri, wrote on the Facebook. He said he checked to see what his insurance premiums would be next year after Obamacare completely goes into effect. Paul and his family would be forced to pay $1,035 a month with a sky-high deductible of $12,700. Paul said he could get coverage from his wife's employer. His wife's a teacher. But with increased costs, the employer's insurance for their family plan would take his wife's entire paycheck because of the new regulations under the Affordable Care Act, which is everything but affordable. Madam Speaker, I ask, is the fight to defund Obamacare worth it? Let me give you another example. Another constituent, Noel said he has worked for 35 hours every year for the last 8 years. 35 hours a week every year for the last 8 years. But guess what? His employer now has changed it where he only works 28 hours a week. Guess why? Because of Obamacare, of the new regulations under Obamacare. Is the fight worth it for Noel? Donald from Festus, Missouri, just south of St. Louis. He told me that his health care premiums is rising from $480 to $740 per month. Donald went on to say that because of his increased insurance cost, he will be contributing $3,000 less a year to our nation's economy. Madam Speaker, do you think fighting Obamacare is worth it? These are my constituents. These are just a few examples of my constituents. These are real people, President Obama. These are people that are affected and required to be in this program, which you are not required to be a part of, which the Vice President of the United States is not required to be a part of, which Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid are not required to be a part of. This is wrong, folks. This is completely wrong. In the last week, this body has voted to defund and to delay Obamacare because it is worth the fight. Democrats in the United States Senate must now justify to the American people why the individual mandate is too harmful for businesses and unions, but should still be forced on families and individuals. The Senate must justify why special interests are eligible for waivers and delays, while average, everyday Americans will be hit with Obamacare tsunami of mandates, fines, and confusion. Madam Speaker, the fight to defund Obamacare is a good fight to have, and I will keep fighting until folks in my district are treated the same way as big businesses and special interests. Madam Speaker, this fight is about fairness. The fight is about families in my district who are seeing skyrocketing insurance premiums and lost wages and lost jobs. Madam Speaker, this is a fight worth fighting for. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for those excellent comments. This is about fairness, fair treatment for all. That's all we're asking. That's something that Americans everywhere can agree on. So as the Senate and as the President hear these words, I hope they will come and let's talk and let's move forward with this. Now I'm happy to yield time to my friend from just south of Missouri a little ways, Oklahoma, fantastic representative and leader here, James Lankford.
Thank you. I thank the gentlelady for hosting this time, be able to talk through some of the serious issues. Madam Speaker, I want to bring to our attention tonight something that we're trying to bring up over and over again. It is a simple injustice and an absolute avoidance of the law. A week ago, this body unanimously, Republicans and Democrats together, agreed unanimously to make sure that the United States military, all civilians, and all civilian contractors would be exempt in case there was a shutdown. The The United States military has taken the brunt of the sequestration, and in bases all over the country and all over the world, they've suffered. They've stopped training missions, they've slowed down the process as they've rapidly tried to adjust to very fast-moving furloughs and sequestration. But they have. They've done what they've been asked to do. So we made sure as a body, Republicans and Democrats together, that in case we got to a government shutdown, the United States military, all civilians, and the civilian contractors that serve with them would not be affected. We passed it. We sent it to the Senate. The Senate approved it unanimously. The President of the United States signed it. That's a done deal. Now we are dealing with every other aspect of the shutdown, or what really is to be better described as a slowdown of the United States government, which is serious. But we knew at least the United States military would not be affected by this. They were held entirely exempt. There were three aspects of this law. You can look it up. H.R. 3210. Three aspects of it. Aspect number one, all Title 10 individuals, all active duty military, without exception, would be held exempt from this. Number two, all civilians that support them, all of them, if they're connected in any way as a civilian to supporting any of our military, they were to be held exempt from this, that the government shutdown would not apply to them. Section 3, all civilian contractors. It's a one-page bill with very broad language, giving authority to the Secretary of Defense to say whoever you determine in any area supports in any way military, they should not be affected by the government shutdown. It's clear, it's plain language. And then it went to the United States Pentagon. And in the Secretary of Defense's office, they have a group of lawyers. And those lawyers say they're studying the law to see who it applies to and who it doesn't apply to. And for this entire week, they have studied the law to see who it applies to and who it doesn't apply to. And our members of the United States military and the civilians that serve with them are on furlough this week against the law. Republicans and Democrats agreed 100% in the House and the Senate, and the Pentagon lawyers can't decide how this should work. A first-year law student could read that bill and could tell it applies to all military Title 10, all civilians that support them in any way, and all contractors. It's not hard language. It is time for the Secretary of Defense to turn to the lawyer into his office and say, release those folks. The law is clear. Our own Defense Department is violating the law. The President is allowing it. It's time to get on with this. Why are we holding them back? While the President stands up and says the Republicans are holding America hostage, the Defense Department really is holding their folks hostage in clear violation of the law. Let's fix it. This is not something that's hard for us. It's already been passed. Let's get on with it. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. What a great point. I mean, it is unbelievable that the commander-in-chief of this country has sidelined some of his own men and women in uniform and the civilians that support and defend this country. Thank you for bringing it up. I agree with you, and we have done everything we can. Members of Congress, when this first happened, we signed a letter and sent it to the President, and we said we did not intend for you to be able to furlough these people. We want everyone back on the job. So far, we haven't heard a thing. As Representative Langford said, they're still studying the issue. Well, I call on the commander-in-chief of this country to step forward and be a commander-in-chief and to put that order out to bring them back for the good of our country. And now I am pleased to yield to my friend from Minnesota, the wonderful lady Michelle Bachmann, for 5 minutes.
I want to thank Representative Hartzler for her wonderful leadership this afternoon. We've heard wonderful comments about why we're here and why this is so important. People all across the United States want us to get our act together in Congress and with the White House and put this country back in the position we've always been in, the greatest economic and military superpower that the world has ever known. But we can't be that superpower, as Representative Langford of Oklahoma said, if our commander-in-chief is illegally furloughing employees who are civilians who are actively supporting our defense initiative when we need them at this critical time in world history. And I want to bring attention to one particular area and underscore what Representative Langford said, because this is so extremely important. It was highlighted today by one of our members, Representative Lee Terry of Nebraska. It was chilling what he told the Republicans today at the microphone. And a story is written about it today in Breitbart.com by Ben Shapiro. And in the article it says President Obama is illegally furloughing civilian defense employees at Stratcom. What is Stratcom? Stratcom, Mr. Speaker, is where thousands of people work to deal with missile defense in the United States. That would include nuclear missile defense. And Mr. Speaker, we are being told that upwards of 60 to 70% of the civilian employees, which are thousands of individuals, have been illegally furloughed, and their job is to secure the safety of the missile defense system in the United States and the nuclear defense system in the United States. The most important title of the President of the United States is to be Commander-in-Chief, because the number one duty of our government is national security. There can be politics played in this town. We get that. You never, ever, ever, ever play politics with missile defense and nuclear defense and the safety and national security of the American people. Mr. Speaker, I call on the President of the United States before the clock strikes midnight tonight, if nothing else, put these civilian employees back in place at Stratcom. The American people and the world needs to know that our missile defense and nuclear defense system is at 100% capability. And I yield back to the gentlelady from Missouri. Thank you.
Thank you. I now would like to yield to the gentleman from Oklahoma, Jim Bridenstine. He's not only served on the Armed Services Committee with him, but he has a very good perspective on all these issues. So I yield 4 minutes to you.
Well, thank you so much. I just wanted to take a moment because there's a lot of information out there, Mr. Speaker, about what's going on in our country right now, and a lot of misinformation. And I thought it would be appropriate just to set the record straight. A little over a week ago, we sent a bill to the Senate, and that bill funded the entire government. It kept the government open, and it defunded Obamacare in its entirety. Senator Harry Reid and the Senate Democrats stripped from that bill the defunding mechanism, and they sent it back to the Senate, or they sent it back to the House. So we looked at it and we said, what can we do that they might agree to? Well, the President has already unilaterally delayed major provisions of Obamacare, including the employer mandate. And he did that because he saw the jobs report. People were being forced from full-time work to part-time work. Many of them were being forced out of a job. In my district, I talked to employers that have 57 employees. One of them had 57 employees. They're trying to get down to 49. And guess what? They did. This is happening across our country. And so the President unilaterally decided he's going to delay the employer mandate. So we said, okay, if he wants to delay that for 1 year, let's give him an opportunity to delay the entire Obamacare for 1 year. So we passed a bill that funded the government, kept the government open, and we sent it to the United States Senate with a 1 year delay of Obamacare. And interestingly, we did that at about 1 o'clock in the morning. Interestingly, the next day, the Senate Democrats took the day off. And the day after that, they didn't even show up until 2 in the afternoon. This was my first indication. As somebody who's new to Congress, I've seen a lot of crazy things. This is my first indication that maybe they wanted a government shutdown. Astonishingly, they just didn't show up. So then, when they did show up, they tabled it. So then we said, okay, well, what if we just delay the employer mandate, the individual mandate? He's already given multi-billion-dollar corporations a one-year reprieve. He's given members of Congress a subsidy. It's not written in the law. In fact, it's illegal. And he had a meeting with Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, and the next thing you know, members of Congress get a subsidy. And so we said, look, if members of Congress are going to get a subsidy and multi-billion-dollar corporations are going to get a break, why don't we give hardworking Americans a one-year reprieve? So we passed a bill that funded the government, kept the government open, and delayed the individual mandate for only 1 year. And of course, Harry Reid took that bill and he immediately moved to table it. So then at about 1 o'clock in the morning, we decided, okay, let's just ask for a conference so that we can have some people from our side and some people from their side get together and work this out. And astonishingly, they didn't even want that. If you can imagine that, they didn't want to sit down and talk to members of Congress. And interestingly, the president called on the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, to go to the White House. And he went and he talked to the president. And guess what the president told him? The president said, we're not going to negotiate. He said, we're not going to negotiate on the continuing resolution to fund the government, nor are we going to negotiate on the debt ceiling. This is not how it's supposed to work in our constitutional republic in split government. But that's where we are. This is indicative of the fact that this is Harry Reid's shutdown. This is President Barack Obama's shutdown. This is not the Republican shutdown. We have done everything we could to keep this government open, and Harry Reid and President Barack Obama have shut it down. But here's the good thing. Here's what we have done. We passed a bill, and that bill said we're going to fund the troops. We passed it unanimously in the House of Representatives. We passed it unanimously in the Senate. The President signed it into law. That's a good thing. Then we had another bill. We thought we could pass it under suspension, so it would require a 2/3 vote, and that bill was to fund the veterans of the United States, the Veterans Administration. Interestingly, members of this body on the other side of the aisle killed it, if you can imagine that. It is every bit as indefensible to kill funding our veterans as it is to not fund our troops. Every bit as indefensible. And then, after that occurred, we wanted a bill that would fund our National Guard and our reserve. I'm a reservist. I've been on active duty. I've been a reservist. I can tell you firsthand, reservists serve this country every bit as honorably as those on the active duty side. And so we wanted to fund them. And guess what? We brought up a bill. We passed it under a rule, so it only required a simple majority, and we passed it. We sent it to the Senate, and they haven't done anything with it. This is where we are. Harry Reid and Barack Obama are holding our veterans hostage, and they're holding the National Guard and our reservists hostage to Obamacare. And it's that simple. And by the way, it's not just to Obamacare. It's one very simple provision that is only a 1-year delay of the individual mandate. And when you think about it, it's really, they're holding it hostage to having a meeting. At the end, we just said, okay, let's have a meeting. And they said, no, we're not going to have a meeting. And oh, by the way, we're shutting down the government. And that's where we are. So I just wanted to clarify that for my constituents back home. We are opening the government one bill at a time, and we're being blocked by the Senate. And certainly it's in nobody's best interest in this country to have a government shutdown. It's nothing any of us wanted. And yet Harry Reid and Barack Obama gave it to us. With that, I thank you for the time, and I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think that was very helpful to review all the steps that what we have done to keep this government open, and how each one of our attempts has been rebuffed, and how the door has been slammed in our face time and time again. But we are still here. We are still working. We're not going to give up. We want to talk. We want to negotiate, and we're going to continue to put forth proposals to fund government, different aspects of government, to make sure that people aren't harmed in this whole process. So thank you for coming today and sharing those thoughts.
Thank you.
You know, I'd like to yield now to my good friend from Kansas, just across the way here, Tim Hulskamp, fellow farmer, and look forward to hearing your thoughts on this very important time. So, Representative, I yield 4 minutes.
I'd like to thank my colleague from the East and also my colleague from the South for their comments. I'd like to follow up first on Congressman Bridenstine's laying out the record of what has occurred, and here you see a list of the votes the House has taken since the government shutdown began. Well, first, as was mentioned, the Senate refused to negotiate, sit down, actually talk. That happened at 1 a.m. on October 1st. Senator Harry Reid says we're not going to talk. We're not going to negotiate. Since then, we've gone to work. The U.S. House Republicans says we're going to try to take care of the veterans. Let's try to take care of funding our national parks. Let's take care of funding the NIH, cancer research for our children. Let's take care of making certain that folks that serve at FEMA are taking care of. A list of vote after vote after vote for the last 4 days. And Congresswoman Hartzler, I appreciate you being here. Take the opportunity so we can show we are at work. We would like to open up the government. The Senate does not. I'd like to point out how busy the Senate has been for the last 4 days. This, Madam Speaker, is a list of all the votes the U.S. Senate has taken since the shutdown occurred. October 1st, the first day of the Harry Reid shutdown, no votes. Day 2 in the U.S. Senate, no votes. Day 3 in the U.S. Senate, not a single recorded vote. Day 4, they must be getting tired over there, not a single recorded vote in the U.S. Senate. The entire week. Now, don't forget, the weekend before the U.S. Senate took the weekend off. They came back Monday to make certain. Harry Reid came back into session on Monday to make certain the U.S. government would be shut down, to the applause of the White House. That was Monday. Tuesday, no vote. Wednesday, no vote. Thursday, no vote. Friday, no vote. They're home on vacation again. And we're going to go back to work tomorrow. We're going to send another bill to the U.S. Senate. It's clear to me, Madam Speaker, clear to me the Senate does not want to open up the U.S. government. But we cannot give up. One other item I would like to mention, and the congressman from Oklahoma has made it very clear, that under Obamacare, every member of Congress, every member of the U.S. Senate, everyone in this body under Obamacare is required to sign up for Obamacare. Monday afternoon, as the government was about ready to close, the last thing, almost the last thing the president did before they locked the doors on the federal government, is they issued a special rule to allow members of Congress to ignore Obamacare, to create our own health care system just for the U.S. senators and members of Congress and our staff. And the last bill we sent over said, you know what, Harry, you know what, we're not going to take part in ignoring Obamacare. That's the very last thing the president did before they shut down the doors. One thing I've done personally is, you know what? I don't accept that. I will not accept the President of the United States saying that members of Congress and members of the U.S. Senate, indeed Kathleen Sebelius, the entire cabinet, should be exempt from Obamacare. If it's good enough for all of America, it should be good enough for them. I went online, as many of us have done, and started to do my responsibility. I don't know if any other members done that, and said, I'm going to sign up for Obamacare. At 12:01 a.m., when the government shut down, the Senate's going home, I'm going to sign up for Obamacare. Madam Speaker, I've been trying to sign up for Obamacare on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Here we are Friday, 91 hours later, and I still am on virtual hold. You've seen the pictures. Go on and look it all up yourself. You can't get online. It's an absolute failure. But I'll say I am absolutely required under the law, Mr. President, despite your regulations that were inspired and requested by the former Speaker of this body and the current leader of the Senate. We are not exempted. Members of Congress, members of the U.S. Senate, members of the Cabinet, the President himself, sign up for Obamacare, lead by example, and do the right thing. We can open the doors of this government, put Congress back out of the role of a privileged class, And again, one thing I'd like to remind this body, the first individual in the entire United States of America that signed up for Obamacare, the very first individual was willing to lead by example, was a man by the name of Harry Truman. Mr. President, if you are listening, if you have any convictions of leadership, if you have any integrity you'd like to show us, sign up for the DC Exchange. Be the next person to sign up online. Try to do it. Hopefully it won't take you 91 hours to get through, but lead by example. No gilded class, no special rights and privileges. No, the Constitution says no nobility clause. I agree with that. I'd like to yield back. I want to thank Congresswoman from the East, my fellow sophomore, Vicky Hartzler, for her leadership on this issue. So let's talk. Let's have some action. And oh, by the way, I'm confused. Was the Senate on furlough all last week? All this week? Get back to work, Harry. I appreciate you joining the battle to open this federal government. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think that shows that the Senate has been, it seems like, on furlough. It's too bad they didn't have time to vote on the NIH funding bill that we sent over there that would ensure that money goes and continues for very vital research such as cancer and Alzheimer's and diabetes and heart disease. We sent them that bill to make sure that research continues and it's fully funded, but it's just sitting over there. They haven't voted on it. We passed a bill dealing with veterans to make sure the Veterans Administration, everything remains open. But they haven't voted on it. It's just sitting over there. We passed a bill to ensure the memorials stay open, to clarify and make sure the President isn't able to close them down and barricade them like he's doing now, but they're not voting on them. This has got to stop. It's time for us to get together and talk, and I appreciate all of my colleagues who've come here tonight to share their thoughts at this very historic time in our country's history. First of all, let people know why we are fighting. We're fighting for our families, and we're fighting for quality health care in this country, and we're fighting for fairness. We believe in fair treatment for everyone. And it's not right that the President says this health care law isn't good enough for corporations, and I'm going to grant over 2,000 waivers for my special interest groups, but yet you, as an American family, hardworking family, you have to comply. And then I thank the gentleman for bringing up the point that even as the law went into effect, it's unworkable. People can't even sign up. You know that the President has had over half of his deadlines he hasn't been able to meet in this law. He's had to extend them. So that's why we're fighting. Let's wait just at least a year and not force every every person in this country to comply. I'm from Missouri, and I know Harry Truman, and he said the buck stops here. The buck should stop here with the Commander-in-Chief when it comes to him allowing the civilians in the military to be furloughed in this country. That has got to stop. And I appreciate my colleagues who brought up this excellent point about what has happened and the travesty and the injustice and the danger that this Commander-in-Chief is putting our country in. And it's wrong, and it needs to stop. He also needs to open up the memorials. We all understand we have difference of opinion here. We all understand we have to talk about policy. But no president ever has closed open-air memorials in this town that are open 24/7, 365 days a year. But this president has chosen to barricade not only the World War I monument and memorial, but the World War II memorial, but also the Martin Luther King memorial, and all the others here in Washington, D.C. And we learned today that they've even closed Normandy. Around the world, they're closing the veteran cemeteries. This has got to stop. We can discuss the policy, but these tactics have got to change. And we want everyone in America to know tonight that Republicans, we are here willing and ready to keep working and to talk. It's time for the President and Harry Reid to negotiate, to meet with us, and to discuss our differences and to come to an agreement that will result in less government. It will keep our government open, though, spend less money, and protect the American people from this onerous health care law. We can do it. The American people do it every day. We do it in our families. We have disagreement. We sit down and talk. My sister and I did it when we were little girls, and my mom made us talk. It works. So let's sit down, let's talk, let's work this out. Let's get our government back open. Let's get all the military reinstated. Let's reopen the memorials here around this country. And let's put the American people first. We can do it. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.